Welcome back to Building Foundations, the podcast by DGI Waterproofing. I'm your host, and we're always tackling those homeowner headaches.
Yeah.
And remember last time we were talking about leaky basement ceilings?
Yeah.
Well, this time we're going even deeper.
Yeah.
Literally into the dreaded flooded basement.
Oh, yeah.
And you know that feeling, right? When it's pouring rain and you're just like, oh no, is my basement going to flood?
Yeah, it's panic.
Yeah, it is a little bit of panic. And honestly, after doing all the research for this deep dive, I realized there are so many ways for a basement to flood.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just like one thing.
It's true. We see it all the time at DGI. People think it's just cracks, but it can be a whole combination of things working against you.
So before we even get into how to dry it out and all of that, let's talk about the why. Why do basements flood after rain? What's happening underground that we might not even be seeing?
Well, your basement is kind of like a boat constantly fighting off water trying to get in it. But unlike a boat, it's anchored to the ground. And that ground can become your enemy during heavy rain.
Okay, so the ground itself can be a problem. That's kind of a new concept for me.
It really can. Our sources are highlighting 4 common culprits behind basement flooding: poor drainage, cracks in the foundation, a high water table, and even the slope of the ground around your house can all play a role.
Okay, so let's break down these culprits one by one.
Yeah.
Because I think, it's easy to overlook some of this stuff until you're standing ankle deep in water.
Yeah.
So let's start with something I think we can all relate to, which is drainage.
Yeah.
Those gutters and downspouts that we all forget about until they're overflowing.
Right.
Those are really important, right?
They are your first line of defense against rainwater.
Yeah, I know I'm guilty of not cleaning my gutters as often as I should.
Well, those clogged gutters can turn into waterfalls pouring right next to your foundation. And if your downspouts aren't directing water far enough away from the house, you're basically inviting it to seep right into your basement.
It's like we're giving it a VIP pass to our basement.
Yeah, exactly. And once that water is hanging around your foundation, it can find its way in through even the smallest cracks.
Speaking of cracks, foundation cracks are another one of those things that I think people just try to ignore because maybe it sounds expensive to fix or it's just not something you want to deal with.
Yeah, ignoring them is definitely the worst thing you can do. Even a hairline crack can channel water into your basement like a tiny little river. And over time, that tiny crack can grow and let in more and more water.
So those cracks are like ticking time bombs.
They can be, especially when you combine them with a high water table.
Okay, now this one is a little more mysterious to me. What exactly is a high water table, and how does it contribute to flooding?
Think of the ground under your house like a giant sponge. The water table is the level at which that sponge is saturated with water.
So basically how high the underground water level is.
You got it. During heavy rain, that water table rises, putting pressure on your foundation, even if you don't have any visible cracks.
So that water can actually be forced through the walls, even if they seem solid?
Exactly. It's called hydrostatic pressure, and it can be incredibly powerful. We've seen it push through concrete block walls.
Oh, wow. That's a little scary. Okay, so we've got clogged gutters, sneaky cracks, and an invisible underground water force working against us. What's the fourth villain in this basement flooding saga?
This one often surprises people. It's the slope of the ground around your house.
You mean the landscaping?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ideally, the ground should slope away from your foundation like a gentle hill. This helps rainwater flow away from your house. But if the ground slopes towards your house, or if it's completely flat, that rainwater has nowhere to go but pool up against your foundation.
And eventually find its way into my basement. So let me get this straight. We have poor drainage, foundation cracks, a high water table, and improper slope all ganging up on my basement. Not a great picture.
You got it. These are the 4 major culprits we see time and time again, and sometimes it's a combination of several of them that causes the real trouble.
So what happens when the unthinkable happens? My basement floods and I'm staring at a pool of water. What's the first thing I should do?
Before you grab a mop and bucket, remember safety first. This isn't just about protecting your belongings, it's about protecting yourself.
Safety first, always something we talk about a lot on the show, but especially important when water and electricity are involved.
Absolutely. The most important thing is to turn off the power to the affected area.
Right. Unless you're Aquaman, you do not want to be wading around in standing water with live electricity.
Exactly. And while you're assessing the situation, check for any structural damage. If you see major cracks, shifting walls, or anything that looks seriously compromised, call a professional right away.
Don't try to be a hero. Better safe than sorry. What else should we be looking out for?
Well, protect yourself. Wear waterproof boots, gloves, and a mask to avoid contact with contaminated water. You never know what's in that flood water.
Okay, the power's off. We've checked for any serious damage, and we're all geared up in our waterproof attire. Now can we finally start getting that water out?
Now comes the fun part, getting rid of all that water. Depending on how bad the flooding is, you have a few options. If you have a sump pump, that's your first line of defense.
Sump pumps. They're like the unsung heroes of dry basements. But what if you don't have one? Or, like, the flooding is really bad?
If you don't have a sump pump or the water is localized, a wet, dry shop vac can be a lifesaver. We use those all the time at DGI. They're surprisingly powerful.
I've used one to clean up spills before, and I'm always amazed by, like, how much they can suck up.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. Okay, so shop's vac for the win.
Yeah.
And if all else fails, or you just have, like, smaller puddles to deal with, what then?
You can always fall back on the good old bucket and mop method.
Yeah, the classic approach. Nothing wrong with that.
All right.
So we've gotten rid of all the standing water, but everything is still damp and probably doesn't smell great. What's next on our drying out to-do list?
Air circulation is key. You want to get that basement breathing again. Open windows and doors if you can to let the fresh air in.
It's like giving your basement a chance to air out after being underwater.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To really speed things up, bring in the big guns, fans, and dehumidifiers.
Ah, yes, the dynamic duo of drying fans to circulate the air and dehumidifiers to suck out all that moisture.
You got it. They're essential for preventing that musty smell and, more importantly, mold growth.
Speaking of mold, I know that's a major concern after a flood. Is there anything else we can do to prevent it?
Don't forget about your HVAC system. Running your heating or air conditioning can help regulate the humidity and dry things out more evenly.
So it's like giving your basement a warm hug to help it dry off. Okay, so we've got the fans going, the dehumidifiers are humming, and the HVAC system is working overtime. Now it's time to face the music and deal with any damaged items.
Yeah.
This is the part I always dread, going through everything and seeing what can be saved and what has to be tossed.
It's never fun, but it's important to act quickly to prevent further damage. Start by removing any wet carpets and rugs.
Soggy carpets are the worst.
Yeah.
And I imagine they're a breeding ground for mold.
They are. Get them out of there as quickly as possible. Next, move any furniture to a dry area. This includes wood and upholstered pieces, which can warp or develop mold if they stay wet too long.
Okay, so we're basically playing furniture musical chairs, but with a much more serious reason.
Exactly. And unfortunately, you might have to say goodbye to some things. Water-damaged materials that can't be salvaged, like drywall insulation and paper-based items, need to be disposed of properly.
It's like a soggy version of Marie Kondo's decluttering method. If it doesn't spark joy and it's soaked, it's got to go. Okay, so we've tackled the water removal and dealt with the damaged items. What's next?
Time for cleaning and disinfecting.
Okay, so we're talking bleach, rubber gloves, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. This step is crucial for preventing mold and other nasty things from growing in those damp corners. Mix up a solution of bleach and water, about 1 cup of bleach per gallon of water, and scrub down all affected surfaces.
Time to go to war against the mold monster.
That's the spirit. And don't forget to sanitize any non-porous surfaces like floors and walls. We can't give mold any chance to take hold.
All right, so we're basically giving our basement a deep clean spa treatment, but with bleach instead of cucumber water?
Exactly. And if you see any signs of mold growth, don't mess around. Call in a professional for proper mold remediation. It's not worth the risk to your health.
Okay, so we've removed the water, dried things out, dealt with the damage, and sanitized everything. Can we finally breathe a sigh of relief?
Almost. But before you declare victory, there's one crucial step that will save you from repeating this whole ordeal. Prevention.
Ah, yes, prevention. We don't want to be going through this every time it rains. So what can we do to protect our basements from future flooding?
Our sources recommend several preventative measures, and it all comes back to those 4 culprits we talked about earlier. Let's start with foundation cracks.
Those tiny little invitations for water to enter our homes.
Exactly. For smaller cracks, you can use a waterproof sealant. Think of it like giving your foundation a Band-Aid.
A waterproof Band-Aid. I like it. But what about the bigger cracks? The ones that are more like gaping wounds?
For larger cracks, or if you're dealing with more serious foundation issues, it's best to call in a professional.
Right. Foundation repair is not a DIY project I want to attempt.
Absolutely. A professional will assess the situation and recommend the best course of action, whether it's injecting epoxy, stitching the crack, or using carbon fiber reinforcement.
Okay, so we've sealed up those cracks. What about drainage? How can we make sure it's doing its job?
Remember those overflowing gutters we talked about? Extending your downspouts is one of the simplest and most effective ways to improve drainage.
Right? Sending that water on a little journey away from our homes. How far away should we extend them? Any specific recommendations?
Ideally, at least 6 feet away from the foundation. And make sure they're directing water away from your house, not toward it. We see that mistake all the time.
Yeah, we don't want to accidentally create a moat around our houses.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of directing water, take a look at the grading around your house.
Grading? Is that like giving my house a report card on its drainage skills?
Not quite. It refers to the slope of the ground around your foundation. It should slope away from your house like a gentle hill. This encourages water to flow away naturally.
It's like giving the water a gentle nudge in the right direction.
Exactly. If the ground is flat, or even worse slopes towards your house, you're basically inviting water to pool up against your foundation.
And that's a recipe for a flooded basement.
It is. If you notice any areas where the grading is off, you can add soil to create the proper slope. It's a bit of landscaping work, but it can make a huge difference.
Okay, we've sealed up the cracks, extended the downspouts, and graded the ground around our houses. What about that high water table? Anything we could do to control that?
This is where our trusty sump pump comes back into play. Installing a sump pump is one of the best ways to protect your basement from a high water table, especially if you live in an area prone to flooding.
So sump pumps really are the superheroes of basement waterproofing. But are all sump pumps created equal?
That's a great question. And the answer is no. There are different types of sump pumps, each with its pros and cons. For example, you have pedestal pumps, submersible pumps, and even battery backup pumps for those times when the power goes out.
So choosing the right sump pump is important. What factors should homeowners consider?
It depends on your specific needs and situation. Things like the size of your basement, the severity of your water table problem, and your budget will all play a role in choosing the right sump pump.
It sounds like this is a good time to consult with a professional. They can assess the situation and recommend the best type of sump pump for the job.
Absolutely. We do that all the time at DGI. We can help homeowners figure out what kind of system they need and make sure it's installed correctly. Speaking of professional help, there's one more preventative measure we should discuss: basement waterproofing.
Okay, this sounds like the ultimate defense against water intrusion. What exactly does basement waterproofing involve?
Basement waterproofing is a comprehensive approach to preventing water from entering your basement. It can involve a variety of techniques, both interior and exterior.
So we're talking about sealing up any potential entry points, both inside and outside the house.
Exactly. Exterior waterproofing might involve things like installing drainage systems, sealing cracks, and applying waterproof coatings to the exterior of your foundation.
It's like giving your foundation a full-body makeover, making it watertight from top to bottom.
That's a great way to put it. Interior waterproofing, on the other hand, focuses on controlling water that has already entered the basement. This might involve installing interior drainage systems, sump pumps, and waterproof coatings on the interior walls.
So it's a multi-pronged attack against water intrusion, both preventing it from entering and controlling it if it does manage to sneak in. Are there different types of basement waterproofing systems?
Yes, there are. And choosing the right system depends on a number of factors, including the severity of your water problems, the type of foundation you have, and of course, your budget. Some common types of basement waterproofing systems include...
So we were talking about all these different types of basement waterproofing systems. Exterior, interior, drainage systems, crack injections, waterproof coatings. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
So I think this is probably a good time to talk about the importance of choosing the right contractor. Because even with all the information and DIY tips we've shared, sometimes you just need to call the professionals right.
You're right. Even with all the knowledge we've discussed, sometimes you need a pro.
And when it comes to basement waterproofing, I imagine choosing the right contractor can make all the difference.
Absolutely. It's not a decision to take lightly. A good contractor can save you a lot of headaches, and a bad one can create even more problems.
Yeah, exactly. So how do you know who to trust? What should homeowners look for when they're choosing a basement waterproofing contractor?
Well, first and foremost, experience matters. You want a contractor who has been in the business for a while and has a proven track record of success.
Makes sense. You don't want to be anyone's guinea pig when it comes to your foundation. So experience is key. What else? What else should we be looking for?
Look for certifications and affiliations. A reputable contractor will be certified by industry organizations like the Canadian Concrete Repair Association or the National Association of Waterproofing Contractors.
So those certifications are like a stamp of approval from the experts.
Exactly. They show that the contractor has met certain standards of knowledge and professionalism.
Okay, so experience certifications. Those are really important.
Wow.
Anything else we should keep in mind?
Don't be afraid to ask for references. A good contractor will be happy to provide you with a list of past clients you can contact.
It's like checking their online reviews, but for basement waterproofing.
Exactly. Talking to previous customers can give you a good sense of the contractor's work ethic, communication style, and overall reliability.
And let's be honest, word of mouth is always the best advertising. If your neighbor had a great experience with a waterproofing company, you're more likely to trust them, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of trust, always get a written contract.
This sounds like common sense, but I feel like it's probably something a lot of people overlook.
You'd be surprised. A written contract protects both you and the contractor. It should clearly outline the scope of the work, the materials to be used, the timeline for completion, and of course the price.
So no surprise fees or hidden costs popping up later on.
Exactly. And don't forget to discuss warranties. A reputable contractor will stand behind their work with a solid warranty.
Right, so if something goes wrong, you're not left high and dry.
That's right. A good warranty will give you peace of mind knowing that the contractor will fix any problems that arise.
Okay, so to recap, when choosing a basement waterproofing contractor, we should be looking for experience, certifications, references, a written contract, and a solid warranty. Did I miss anything?
I think you covered it all.
And of course, trust your gut. If something feels off or you don't feel comfortable with a contractor, move on.
It's your home and your investment. You have the right to choose someone you trust.
Exactly. Speaking of trust, I think it's safe to say that our listeners can trust the team at DGI Waterproofing.
I agree. We have a team of experienced, certified professionals who are dedicated to providing high-quality waterproofing solutions.
And we stand behind our work with a solid warranty.
That's right. We're committed to ensuring that our customers have dry, safe, and worry-free basements.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into drying out those wet basements, and more importantly, preventing them from flooding in the first place. We covered a lot today, from the 4 culprits of basement flooding to all those steps you can take to dry out a wet basement and prevent that future water damage. And of course, how to choose the right contractor.
I think our listeners are feeling much more confident and empowered to tackle those water woes.
I hope so. And remember, if you're ever feeling overwhelmed or unsure about what to do, don't hesitate to reach out to the experts at DGI Waterproofing. We're here to help. You can find us online at dgwaterproofing.ca or give us a call. We're happy to answer your questions, address your concerns, and help you find the best waterproofing solution for your home.
That's right. Give us a call.
Thanks for joining us on Building Foundations. We'll be back soon with more tips and advice to help you keep your home safe and dry. Until then, stay dry, everyone.